Hello students, if you can remind, in the last video I talked about the first part of the neuromuscular system, that is the nerve. Structure of the nerve I discussed in my earlier video. There I told that neuromuscular system is comprised of nerve, muscle, and in between this a specialized junction that is known as the neuromuscular junction. So today in this video I will discuss the structure of the neuromuscular junction. So I'll try to make you understand the structure of the neuromuscular junction. So please watch this video till the end to get the clear concept regarding these topics. So neuromuscular junction, as I told, it is the specialized structure in between the nerve and the muscle. You know that for initiating or for doing any contractile process, for the contractions of the muscle, voluntary muscles especially, the nerve supply, the stimulation of the nerve is required. So if a nerve is stimulated and that particular nerve is supplied to a muscle, then that muscle contracts. And this excitation of the nerve fiber and contractions of the muscle, they are because of the presence of a structure that is known as the neuromuscular junction. So this is the neuromuscular junction structure. So obviously neuromuscular junction will comprise of three parts. One is the part of the neuron that gives that supplies that particular muscle. The muscle, that is the effector organ, that is the second component, and third component is a gap in between the nerve and the muscle. So this neuromuscular junction has got mainly three components. First one is the part of the nerves which give the supply to a particular muscle. So this is the nerve, and that nerve is known as the presynaptic neuron. Presynaptic neuron. So the terminal of this presynaptic neuron is known as the axon terminal of the presynaptic neuron or the synaptic terminal of the presynaptic neuron. So that is the first component of the neuromuscular junction is the synaptic terminal or axon terminal of presynaptic neuron. This is the first component of the neuromuscular junction structure. So this is the presynaptic neuron terminal, axon terminal. This is the motor neuron. So once any motor neuron comes in close contact with the muscle membrane, that is sarcolemma, while approaching toward the sarcolemma, the motor neuron sheds off its myelin sheath. Here you see, this is the myelin sheath. So here at the terminal end of the axon, there is no myelin sheath. It is a naked structure. So there is no myelin sheath. And then it gives out different branches, and so this is one branch, this is another branch that ultimately terminates into a knob-like structure, that is a synaptic knob. This is synaptic knob. This is the larger view of a synaptic knob of the presynaptic neuron terminal. So this is the structure of the presynaptic neuron which actually comes in contact or which invaginates to the sarcolemma of the muscle. So this is the first part, that is the presynaptic terminal of the presynaptic neuron. So regarding these details of these things, here you see in this presynaptic neuron, obviously there will be the cytoplasm. There will be the cytoplasm, that is known as the exoplasm. So there will be it contains the exoplasm, along with different organelles, along with different cell organelles. Different cell organelles. Here you see the mitochondria, cytoskeleton, that are microfilaments. This is the mitochondria, and these are the microfilaments. These are present within the exoplasm, in the synaptic terminals. Besides these, as usual, cell organelles, there is a very important cell organelles are present within the synaptic terminal, which is known as the synaptic vesicle. So these are the synaptic vesicle. So synaptic vesicles are the important component which are present within this synaptic terminal, and these synaptic vesicles contains different type of the neurotransmitters like acetyl choline. So neurotransmitters are there within this, or stored there within this synaptic vesicle. Now, besides these structures, there is another important component which is present on the presynaptic membrane. So this is the membrane of the presynaptic action terminal. On this membrane, there is a structure. This is the structure which is known as the voltage gated calcium channels. So it contains voltage gated calcium channels on presynaptic membrane. Presynaptic membrane contains the voltage gated calcium channels through which calcium ion can enter inside. So this is the first part of the first component of the synaptic junction structure, that is the synaptic terminals of the presynaptic neuron. Synaptic terminal or axon terminal of the presynaptic neuron, which contains the exoplasms, which contains different type of cell organelles like mitochondria, microfilaments. Besides this, a specialized vesicular structure, that is known as the synaptic vesicle, that contains the neurotransmitter acetyl choline. And on the presynaptic membrane, there is a voltage gated calcium channels. So these are the parts of the first component, that is synaptic terminal of the presynaptic neuron. Second component of this neuromuscular junction is basically the gap in between the sarcolemma, So this gap is the extracellular fluid. So this gap is known as synaptic cleft. So second component of this neuromuscular junction is the synaptic cleft. And this synaptic cleft, this gap basically contains the extracellular fluids, So whatever components of extracellular fluids are there, whatever substances are there in the extracellular fluid, all are present in this gap, that is known as the synaptic cleft. And this gap, this diameter, this gap is about 30 nanometer. So this gap is about 30 nanometer. That is the gap which is known as synaptic cleft, and that synaptic cleft contains basically the extracellular fluid. This gap also contains a structure that is actually the part of the Sarcolemma membrane, which is known as the Basal Lamina. So this is the Basal Lamina. So this is the part which is known as the Basal Lamina. And this Basal Lamina that comes under, so this synaptic cleft also contains a structure that is known as the Basal Lamina. And this Basal Lamina, this contains an enzyme known as Acetyl Cholinesterase. As I told, synaptic vesicle contains the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Once the nerve is stimulated, acetylcholines are released. How it is released, that I will discuss in another video. Once the acetylcholine comes here, this acetylcholine comes here, acetylcholine comes released here, then this acetylcholine will bind with the receptor, that I will come later. And once the action of the acetylcholine is over, then this acetylcholinesterase enzyme, they breaks down the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So this enzyme is responsible for breakdown of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine once its action is over. Once its action is no more required, then this acetylcholinesterase enzyme is responsible for breakdown of the acetylcholine, and that enzyme is present in the basal lamina, which is the part of the synaptic cleft. Now is the third component. So this is the second component, and third component is basically the muscle membrane, that is sarcolemma, on which the nerve invaginate. So nerve give the supply to a muscle. So nerves invaginates towards the muscle membrane, sarcolemma, and this part is known as this structure or the invagination of the motor neuron on the sarcolemmal membrane, that is known as the motor end plate. So motor end plate, which is basically the postsynaptic membrane of sarcolemma. Of the muscle on which the nerve invaginates. So this is the third component, that is motor end plate, that is basically the postsynaptic membrane of sarcolemma of the muscle. That is the third component of the neuromuscular junction. Now in this third component of this neuromuscular junction, what's happened on the postsynaptic membrane? Here you see, this is the folded structure, a very folded structure. This folded structure of the postsynaptic membrane is known as palisade. So this folded structure, so this is the folded structure. Extensive foldings are there, folded structure. And this folded structure for what? For what? To increase the surface area. To increase the surface area. So that large number of the acetylcholine neurotransmitter can act on the muscle membrane, and thereby the enter muscle fibers, all the muscle fibers present in the muscle mass can contract at a time. So there is a vigorous contraction takes place, and to initiate these things, surface area has to be large, and this surface area is increased by the foldings, numerous foldings of the sarcolemmal membrane. So this is the sarcolemma. This is the sarcolemma. So sarcolemma is the folded structure at this part which contributes the neuromuscular junction, where the motor nerve invaginates. At that particular part, the sarcolemma gets folded, and that folded part of the sarcolemma is known as the palisade. Now on this sarcolemmal membrane, there are two types of components present. One is the ligand gated calcium channels. So these are the ligand gated calcium channels. So these are the ligand gated ion channels. Ligand gated ion channels are there on the membrane of the sarcolemma. These are all are the ligand gated ion channels. Ligand gated ion channel means these are the channels which used to open or close once a chemical substance can bind on this. So this is why it is known as the ligand gated, just like voltage gated. So these gated channels are opened in response to change of the voltage of this membrane. But in this case, once the neurotransmitter acetylcholine gets bind with this, then this channel used to open or this channel used to close, and these are the channels that is present on the sarcolemmal membrane, which is known as ligand gated ion channels. So ligand gated ion channels is also present. Ligand gated ion channels are also present on the sarcolemma, and these ligand gated ion channels may be of sodium ion, ligand gated sodium ion channels, or ligand gated potassium ion channels, or ligand gated chloride ion channels. So this different type of ion channels, which are ligand gated ion channels, present on the membrane of the sarcolemma. And third component of these things is the receptor. So here you see this is the receptor, this is the receptor, this is the receptor, this is the receptors on which the neurotransmitter acetylcholine binds. So these are the neurotransmitter acetylcholine which will bind with the receptor. So receptors are also there. Receptors for acetylcholine binding. For the neurotransmitter acetylcholine binding, there are some receptors present on the membrane. So once the acetylcholine gets bind with the receptor, this acetylcholine gets bind with this, then only these ligand gated ion channels is to open or close, and thereby the signal is passed from this neuron to the sarcolemma of the muscle. And the details of this transmission process I will discuss in another video. So these are the three components of the neuromuscular junctions, and here is once this muscle gets activated, the action potential is responsible for some chemical changes that is responsible for contractions of these myofilaments or muscle fiber. So these are the myofilaments of the muscle fiber which are responsible for contractions of the muscle. So this is how the structure of the neuromuscular junction. Now here one important point is that, so as I told, the third component is known as the motor end plate. What is the another term that is associated with this neuromuscular junction, that is known as the motor unit. Motor unit. So what is this motor unit? Motor unit is the single motor neuron. Single motor neuron. Suppose this is a motor neuron. This is a motor neuron which has got different synaptic terminals. So each of the synaptic terminal is innervated with the muscles. Innervated with the muscles. So a single ventral horn or motor neuron, ventral horn of motor neuron or the motor neuron, along with its all fibers, these are the fibers of the motor neuron, and the muscles which are supplied by that single motor neuron is collectively known as the motor unit. So these are all collectively known as the motor unit. So motor unit is the single motor neuron. So it comprised of single motor neuron. Number two, all its fibers, here 1, 2, 3, 4 fibers, all its fibers, and finally each of the fiber gets supplied to a muscle. So here 4 muscles are there. So all the muscle fibers which are supplied, by this single motor neuron, all are collectively known as the motor unit. And the number of the muscles that is present in a single motor neuron, this varies. So number of muscles present in single motor neuron varies. It is not always same. It gets varied. The number of the muscles in a motor neuron, these are very few in case of muscles which are responsible for skilled movement. For the skilled movement, for the fine movement, for example, the skill or the fine movement, it is better to write fine movement. For the fine movements, for example, the pharyngeal muscles movement, laryngeal muscles movement, the extraocular muscles movement. In this case, their number of muscles in a motor unit neuron or motor unit is less. This is around 3 to 6 muscles per motor neuron. A single motor neuron gives supply to only 3 to 6 muscle fibers in case of laryngeal muscles, pharyngeal muscles, extraocular muscles, which muscles are responsible for fine movement. But which muscles are responsible for coarse movement? Muscles responsible for coarse movements, the number of muscle in a motor unit is more. How much? It can be 120 to 160 muscles per motor unit. And these are present in case of the leg muscles, in case of the neck muscles, which are responsible for the postural adjustment of the body, and the entire type of the coarse movements. So all coarse movements, all the muscles which are responsible for coarse movement and the gross movement or gross movement, coarse movement or the gross movements, the muscles has got the more number of muscles has got a single motor neuron. So in case of coarse movement, the muscles which are responsible for coarse movements like the neck muscles has got more muscle fibers in a single motor unit or single motor neuron, gives a supply to the large number of the muscle fibers which are responsible for coarse movement. Now another thing is important in this part, that as I told, this nerve fiber which gives a supply to the muscle membrane, these are the myelinated nerve fibers. These are myelinated nerve fibers. And as you know, the myelinated nerve fibers are very fast, in which the conduction or the velocity of the signal goes very fast. So the muscles which are conducted by the myelinated nerve fibers are known as the fast muscles. So there are fast muscles. So depending on the motor unit, depending on type of motor neuron, there are two types of muscle. One is known as the fast muscle or white muscle, and another one is known as the slow muscle or red muscle So fast muscle or white muscle is supplied by the rapidly conducting motor neuron, that is the myelinated. Myelin sheath diameter is very, very large, very high. So this is why they are fast conducting. They are fast contracting. So this is that type of muscle is known as the fast muscle. So fast muscle is supplied by rapidly conducting motor neuron. Rapidly conducting motor neuron. Whereas the slow muscle is supplied by slowly conducting motor neuron, and this is in a single motor neuron. A particular single motor neuron will always innervate the same type of muscle, either the fast muscle or the slow muscle. A particular motor neuron will always supply to only a single type of muscles, fast muscle or the slow muscle, not mixed. A single motor neuron will not mixing up with the fast muscles and the slow muscles. So a single motor neuron either will give the supply to the fast muscle or to the slow muscles, and this is the principle which is known as this principle is known as the Dale's principle. And as I told, the fast muscle is supplied by the rapidly conducting motor neuron, and slow muscle is conducted by the slow conducting motor neuron, and this is the principle which is known as the size principle. So two things are here important. One is the size principle, another is the Dale's principle. Size principle is that fast motor neuron, first muscle will be supplied by the rapidly conducting motor neuron, whereas slow muscle or red muscle will be supplied by the slowly motor neuron. So that principle is known as size principle. And another principle is that a single motor neuron will supply to a single type of the muscle fiber, either fast or slow, never mixed. And that principle is known as the Dale's principle. So two principles are related with this motor unit. I hope the structures of the neuromuscular junction along with the motor unit is very clear to you. The details of these things will be given to the description box along with the reference. If this video is very clear to you, for your understanding, better understanding, please share it to your friends and subscribe to the channel if it is not yet subscribed. Thank you.